Um, and radical self-responsibility, funnily enough, I actually said that in this particular forum.
I hope you said bark the shoulds as well.
No, I didn't. But the look of shock that came back, it just surprised me that I didn't realise how many different things that we've done that have allowed us to hold ourselves to a level of accountability.
Yeah.
And, you know, that turning up authentically is probably the next thing that we've evolved to. So that when we turn up to hold space for one another, or when the rare occasion where it happens that, you know, you and I aren't quite on the same page.
Yes.
How we get to that same page in a much faster fashion without the...
Well, it's basically just you acquiescing. Is that how it goes?
Pretty much. But without the kicking and screaming as such.
Yeah.
You know,
without the McGill mantra.
Yes, pretty much. It's all fun and games, you know, until someone loses an eye, which, you know, I can barely see.
Welcome, Quanta folks, to episode 15 of Fark the Shoulds. And in beautiful, true style, McGill's not entirely sure what we're talking about. And I mean, you guys know I just find this endlessly delightful. I am Jodi from QuantiMama.
And I am the happily tortured McGill from QuantiPapa.
Listen to him, he's so tortured. So today's topic is now and then, about lessons of wisdom and how we can have moments in our life where we're given perhaps an opportunity or a framework to look at where we've come from and I guess really appreciate the wisdom that we have inherited over time. And I don't think you need to be in your mid to late 40s as we are to be in that space. You know, I know there are moments in my 20s where I was like, oh, wow, I've learned some stuff. But this conversation's really born out of the fact that McGill had the opportunity to do some reflection in a more structured way recently. And so I think what I was really interested to do was to, you know, just have a conversation around the wisdom and what that looks and what occurred for you. Because one of the things that you said was, I didn't realize how much like I had integrated or changed and how different I was. And so what were some of the standout things that happened for you, you know, in the course of that interview?
It's a rather big question.
We don't do small ones, babe.
No.
You know that.
No. Well, so maybe I'll put a tiny bit more perspective on there. It was interesting the amount of things that came up and the answers I gave in relation to extremely pointed questions at myself and my life and the people around me. And that there were some things that have been constants, funnily enough, from our mid to late 20s to our mid to late 40s that had that we still abide by. And then there's so many other things obviously that have not worked or fallen by the wayside. And I was really fascinated when I was presenting this picture of myself, and a lot of it was in relation to mental health and emotional well-being and dealing with stress and ability to interact in, you know, conflict situations and that sort of stuff. And what I was stunned at was by the range of strategies that I have, which then reflect back onto, I guess, the range of strategies that you and I have within our relationship.
Yes.
And I've never stopped and looked back to see how I've changed.
Yes.
And how my use of strategies have changed and what they've become. And there's no doubt that they will morph and they will change as time goes on. But one of the standout things that came up, one of the questions was in relation to how you deal with a situation that seems beyond your control. It could be something where you're witness to something or involved in something that's, you know, could be bloody or gory or could be really emotionally charged. And the first thing that immediately came to mind was when beautiful young Jodi, before she was QuantiMama, came along. Before we had kids, we were both shift work in our emergency services role, and you see a lot of stuff, and
Yeah.
you have.
It's kind of the nature of the job.
It is kind of the nature of the job. But you also deal with a lot of stuff that general public are not going to be privy to, and probably for their greatest good don't need to be privy to. But that sort of stuff leaves a mark. And one of the things we decided very early on in our relationship was that if we ever had a challenging shift or a job or an incident that was just mind-blowing, and you got home from the end of the shift, it didn't matter if it was 1 o'clock in the morning or whether it was, 7:30 in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we would stop and we would talk about that and discuss what it was. And it was never so much that we discussed for one another to give a solution. It was more about discussing to move the emotion,
yes,
and the stress that we had attached to that thing. And it was funny because that's one of the strongest things that came out of this entire thing. We did that somehow, probably 20 years ago, or not quite, maybe 19 years ago.
Yeah, so there was an interesting wisdom. I mean, I do think having an emergency services background is useful in the sense that it's a pressure pot of experiences that are probably as you say, the experiences that the general public, middle class mums and dads will generally never experience. Like it's extreme, right? That's the whole point. You're at the pointy end of those extreme crises for people, and you witness that, the raw emotion and, the incredible opportunities for how life can stretch you, and even bearing witness to that, or being essentially an asset of help in those situations, you still go on the sort of tsunami of emotion with those experiences. And so I always really am so grateful for those jobs, because they really afforded us I think a healthy perspective of life and some great coping strategies. And so it's interesting that you noticed that, and that we had that as an agreement very early in our relationship. So in our late 20s, we had that as a strategy. But it's not really a strategy that is formed out of some sort of need for acute mental health, strategies. It's actually about having a relationship where if your significant family member is in need, it's about putting down what you're doing and being fully present. And that's fucking great. Oh, that's curious. Oh, it's still recording.
Even though it said it wasn't.
All right. That was like a little enforced intermission. I just love these technical things. They really give us an opportunity to, work on those coping mechanisms.
They do. And
I have to regroup and think about what I was going to say. So I think I was midway through saying that the thing I really like and am grateful for is working in emergency services. It becomes this hothouse opportunity to create coping mechanisms. And I think that we did that early on. And so if we unpack what you were talking about, what we essentially created was an opportunity that if our significant other, or, so one of your significant family members needs support, and they come in saying, I need to talk, then you literally stop what you're doing, give them your full attention, and you don't try and solve it, which is the key. Yeah, because it's a hard thing, isn't it, to not solve those things?
Oh, and especially when it's someone you care about. You're emotionally invested in the well-being of this person, and you want the absolute best for them.
Yes.
And your first thing is to try and make it better. And sometimes in doing that, it doesn't always work out for the best. Yes. And it's something that, funnily enough, I'm glad that we started with this one, because it's something that then comes so thick and fast back through the rest of our time together, and then how we're coping with our beautiful children.
Well, because we give them that experience, and I think that's where I was thinking too, is that there are things that we learn that we sort of reach this sort of age, and we have an appreciation of the wisdom within that, and then we can pass it on to the kids. But I feel like we're recognizing that, and the kids are getting the benefit earlier, because our kids are being raised in that way, aren't they? Where we don't solve their problems for them. We bear witness to it and we listen to them and we hold space for it. But now we don't even do a bit of the theirs, or, oh, how about this, or how about that?
No, we pass on our emotional support in a different way.
Yeah.
We don't shut down what they're saying or cut off their thought halfway through. We try to let them work all the way through what they want to say. And the amazing thing with kids is that in this particular instance is they often know or understand what the answer is. They're just wanting to talk it out themselves.
Yes. And so one of the traps that we fall into, I think that wisdom then affords that separation, is always looking to create comfort. And I know that we've talked about this before, but there's a great opportunity with any of these things to have comfort in the discomfort. And often the person that is needing to share or express how they're feeling, they literally just need to be heard, but they certainly don't need it short-circuited or mitigated or eliminated. They literally just need to be listened to.
They do. And I think that's an evolution of that original strategy we had. The original thing we had was, if you get home, you've had a crappy shift, you've seen whatever you've seen.
Yeah.
Just talk about it. So the other party is aware, so they have a bit of an understanding of, why you might be a bit off your game.
Yes.
And that's probably as simple as that was when it started. And it has grown and it's morphed over time. And it's a strategy that's become obviously a prevalent one.
Yes.
In our family and in our own lives as well.
Yeah.
And we're getting better. I still sometimes want to step in and save the day, and that's probably part of my background and who I am. But you can still do that, but it's not. I can still do that, but it's not my role to do that at that point in time. It's my role to allow yourself or the children to express what they need to express.
Yeah.
And as we said, that beautiful saying that energy is just, emotion in motion, or emotions are energy in motion.
Is energy in motion, yeah.
Yeah, that just, sometimes it's moving that energy that allows the clarity to come in, or one of us or someone to be receptive to hear what a potential solution may be.
Yeah, and I think that people are scared about expressing that energy through the emotions, maybe because there's a sense of weakness or acopia or any of those things. But I suspect that as we become more fluent in the knowledge around trapped emotions and what that means in the body, how that expresses in the body, and I think that, as that awareness increases in our society, we will become far more sophisticated in allowing emotions to flow and move through, because they actually do reach their own climax and peter out, don't they? But when we short circuit it, we don't. And there's that sort of tussle where essentially it gets encapsulated neatly in the body that probably is what's showing up as dis-ease later on,
And that cutting off, or that stopping it at that point, allows it never to be dealt with.
Yeah.
And, and that's, and we both Jodi and I, through our roles, have seen some stuff that's pretty challenging, but none of it sticks with me.
No.
And this was another thing that came up through this whole thing when they were unpacking my 20 years of policing experience and some of the stuff I'd done. And this, the people I was talking to were stunned with how, not so much how blasé, but how at peace I was with some of the things that I had done within my career, and how I didn't tend to hold any emotion. They really drilled down on me too. It felt a little bit uncomfortable.
Well, I think a lot of people fake that. They say, I'm fine, and because there's such charged experiences, like each of them on their own is a charged experience, that can be the kind of thing that really leaves an indelible mark on most people. So to have multiples of those, it doesn't sort of make sense to the logical mind that you would not be marked by that in some fashion.
Well, it also brought to me, I was really surprised, and I know that people in the room were as well, with the language I had around a lot of the sort of stuff, about how I could openly, so we drilled into even passing of family members for me, and they drilled right into there, and about 5 or 6 times I was offered tissues.
Yeah. Cue the cry.
Yeah, cue the cry. It's like, hang on a minute,
Yeah.
And it's funny because we've spoken on death before.
Yes.
And we have a much different look at it. It is extremely sad. And when we look back on those beautiful loved ones we've lost, we grieve for the loss of who they were.
Yes.
We don't necessarily grieve for the fact that they've chosen to go.
Oh, I don't feel that sadness. And I realise that for some people that might be that I lack empathy, but I just accept that death is part of living. Like it's like the sky is blue and the grass is green. I just accept it as a fact of life, and I actually really like celebrating it. But it makes me deeply unpopular because people are uncomfortable with that lack of sad emotion. And maybe if you're living your life in a way that for the most part you don't ever have regrets about what you've said or what you've done, and by the same token what you've not said and what you've not done, I think that healthy sense of mortality is quite motivating for getting the shit done you want done, and maybe making sure that all those conversations are had.
Well, it gives a different perspective. And we've had the luxury to support from a bit of a distance close friends of ours who've had a parent who's well in their 90s pass away. And watching the way they dealt with that was just amazing, and the coping strategies they had. But as they openly said, and this was my experience as well with the passing of my parents, is we had those discussions.
Yes.
We spoke about things that were from the past and things that may have been regrets or things that we may have held on to or things that may have been those emotional blocks in us. And these are some of the strategies of discussion and sharing and openness and vulnerability and putting yourself out there, give you the opportunity to literally heal yourself.
Yes.
To have a greater and deeper understanding into what the crisis is that a person might be experiencing, and allowing yourself to, just for briefest of moments, put yourself into their position, but then allowing them to stay in their position while they express what they've got that's building up. And it was just really interesting because I was sort of sitting there thinking, I hope I don't sound too over the top here, but what other strategies do you need to know? And
as in over the top, how?
As in too overconfident or too polished, almost
too put together.
Yeah, possibly too put together. Should I love it? Fuck the shoulds. Do I need to have a vulnerability in that particular area where it turns out, without me realizing, I've actually got a really good knowledge?
That's such a bullshit game playing thing to do, though.
And that's exactly what I mean.
So that's my issue with society, is that as society, we don't always support one another in these, I guess, iterations of ourselves where the wisdom is coming through even more. And I guess another point of that wisdom that I think that we impart to our kids and those around us as well, and I'm not saying that we're the only ones that do this, but I think it is part of that wisdom, is that if you think back to, say, the acceptance of death and death of family members, if you do have regrets that you haven't perhaps said certain things or said certain things and wished that you hadn't, another angle of that that wisdom is some radical self-responsibility, which I just love coming back to, because when you have radical self-responsibility, you then accept the fact that you did or you didn't at the time, and you made the decision that you thought was best, or certainly served you the best, perhaps. But whatever it was with the best intentions. And then in that space, you get to immediately forgive yourself and forgive the other party. And, what's done is done. So one of the things that we can do is create illness out of living in the past and having regrets and so forth. But a radically self-responsible person doesn't. They accept the fact that maybe they fucked up. They accept the fact that maybe they said something or didn't say something, and they use the wisdom from that, but they don't stay in the space of forever sort of flagellating themselves for what they did or didn't do. And again, that's another gift of wisdom, that we don't shy away from presenting to kids and to other people. And I think there's something lovely that we can be as mirrors to one another. And, so when you notice those things, you can say, hey, you can get as hung up as you like about this, but, it's in the past now. So the only way to high vibe it is to take wisdom from it.
Yeah, and as soon as you're not taking the wisdom from it, you're spending your energy in that field, and you're spending your energy in the past instead of moving it into your present and allowing it to be part of you as you go forward. And radical self-responsibility, funnily enough, I actually said that in this particular forum.
I hope you said "bark the shoulds" as well.
No, I didn't. But the look of shock that came back at me just surprised me, that I didn't realise how many different things that we've done that have allowed us to hold ourselves to a level of accountability.
Yeah.
And, that turning up authentically is probably the next thing that we've evolved to. So when we turn up to hold space for one another, or when the rare occasion where it happens that, you and I aren't quite on the same page.
Yes.
How we get to that same page in a much faster fashion without the...
Well, it's basically just you acquiescing. Is that how it goes?
Pretty much. But without the kicking and screaming as such.
Yeah. Without the McGill mantra.
Yes, pretty much. It's all fun and games, until someone loses an eye, which, I can barely see. So it was just interesting suddenly looking back at my own life and a lot of our relationship, because obviously you feature quite heavily through that. I mean, I think I'd done 2 years in emergency services before we met, and you'd probably done 3 or 4.
Something like that.
So we were pretty raw into it. And there's skills that have served us, that have brought us through to this point, and there's skills that we've also brought into our family, into our children, as we've sort of discussed. And it was just one of those interesting things where I was amazed at the amount of evolution we've actually had.
Yes.
You've gone from marrying this bogan that grew up in the northern suburbs of Melbourne to, dragging him out of that.
Yes.
Into slightly...
We left the bourbon behind, I'm very pleased to say.
Into some sort of semi-respectable person that, can string more than a couple of words together.
You've really evolved, darling.
I had a long way to evolve.
No, you didn't. Stop selling yourself short.
But that's half the fun. But so it was just interested in the other coping mechanisms and strategies that we have, because they also then apply to stress.
Yes.
And this was, I guess this is probably where I want to get around to as well, where it's become, in particular for so many of us and so many people in the last 3 to 4 years, the change in what society has expected, or society's demands that have been put on the individual, put on the family unit, put on couples. And when you choose to not necessarily walk to the beat of that drum, or you choose to stand in your own power and go, well, hang on a minute, I'm not just acquiescing to that.
Yes. What
strategies you have when suddenly you feel like you're no longer part of the mainstream?
Yeah.
And I think that very importantly then comes back down to the nucleus of how happy you are, within yourself.
Yes.
If you're lucky enough to have a partner, how happy and comfortable you are with your partner and that relationship. And then if you have a greater relationship that extends to immediate family of your own children.
Yes.
What the strength is there before you even step outside of that to your extended family.
Yeah, so you're talking your immediate family, whether they're blood related or acquired, as in friends, right?
Yes.
And partners.
Well, I'm starting off with the blood related stuff. So I'm looking at our situation going, husband and wife and kids. That's our little nucleus right here.
Yeah.
And, a lot of I got a beautiful message the other day from a friend of mine, and he said, I'm going to be more like you. I'm just going to walk through life and not let it bother me. And I thought, that's beautiful. I'm glad that's what you see, but
that's not how you roll.
It's not. No. It bothers me. Sometimes life bothers me. It's how I deal with that bother.
Well, we literally had this conversation with dear friends last night, and what I said, and I said I've been mistakenly sort of pigeonholed into someone who's not empathetic, which really wounded my ego. Like, it really gave me the shits, because I'm like the most empathetic person I know, which I realise is a joke. But one of the things that really struck me was I just want to find acceptance with my emotions. And that was how I phrased it. And I really like that, because the acceptance of your emotions, or however you're responding in that moment, as long as obviously you're not hurting people intentionally, that would be a no-no. But, to be annoyed at something, or to be happy at something, or to, find joy where perhaps others don't, or to find comfort where perhaps others are not finding acceptance. I want to be okay with all those things, because that's all part of me, and essentially my my true essence. My set of personal instructions that have given me mechanisms for understanding that other people might not, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I want to be okay with that. I'm not lacking in empathy. I just don't conform to how society expects me to conform in certain situations. Like, I laugh at inappropriate things that could really get me in trouble. And I don't cry at death. Like that, it just doesn't trigger that. It would be an inauthentic response. And I find acceptance with that. And one of the things that I think wisdom has afforded us, particularly in the last 3 years, because I have had different opinions to, say, mainstream views, is that I must approach all of this with a sense of love.
Mm.
I just have to. I'm not interested in division. And that wisdom feels so expansive. Like, that's good wisdom. That's one you want to bottle and have a little sip from at the start of the day, going, all right, let's do a bit of this wisdom of, just approaching people with love, and not in a way of just being a doormat and, going, love is everything. But it's about acknowledging that when someone's in the middle of their shit show, and they are unraveling, and they're directing that energy to you because they need to move that energy. It needs to come out of them. I mean, that's a natural way of self-healing, is to move the energy outside. So we express the anger, we express the frustration, we express all of those big, sometimes ugly emotions. But in that space, I must be the mirror for them, so that I don't take it on. They're not talking to me. They're essentially looking at their reflection, and they are just moving the energy out of them. And that's the wisdom I love. And that's how I hold space with people with love. And I feel like that's the way forward for all these things, because we're always going to have different opinions. We will view life, as we said, about 1 million episodes ago, wasn't it? Because we've been doing this for so long. But, that camera lens through which we view life, perception being so instrumental in our experience. But you can have a different opinion, and we can still love each other in that space. We don't have to agree.
No, and you don't have to agree on everything. And coming back to that, love is a great place to start.
Yes.
But exactly, and I want to really reiterate this: you're not a doormat.
No.
Just because you approach people with love does not stop you in any way, shape, or form from holding your ground or staying true to who you are. You don't compromise yourself in order to make another person feel better. If they need to debrief you, and we see this with our beautiful children, because they're raw and they are emotions, and they are, hard on the sleeve, and they don't have all these filters that society puts onto us.
They're not polluted.
They're very pure. And when they're letting that stream out, and it can come as a verbal diatribe, particularly our youngest, who can literally swear like a trooper when he gets going. And for me, that's always been triggering. So I get caught up into the language, because I grew up with a mother that tutted every time she heard the F-bomb.
Yeah. Wow, she would really not be coping now.
She got out at the right time, I think.
She did.
But it's just interesting that when I was able to divorce myself from the word and go, it's just a word.
Yeah.
Yes, it has a level of attachment to it, but when it's coming out of someone that's just hasn't got the other words to express what they need to say, and they're so heightened and they're so angry that it feels pretty good to let one of those words out.
Yes.
And I challenge you to think about your own self when you're in that situation and you're so angry that sometimes you just want to scream fuck out at the word.
Yeah. Do it. Yeah.
Just do it.
Do it.
Because that is the first part of the release. That is the first part of moving that energy.
Yes.
And we're humans, we're physical beings.
Yes.
So moving something in a physical way is really powerful.
Yes.
And it allows a release to happen on a much faster or a much quicker scale.
And it's so healthy because then you end up not directing that energy at someone who is not related to it, you know. And I think often what will happen is we'll use kids for that, because kids have a way of getting under our skin. So, you know, stuff will have been going upstream for us, and then the kids do something and you overreact, and it's like totally out of proportion. I mean, I've done that like a gazillion times. You know, there's a million hurts that I've done and orchestrated for our kids. I'm so grateful to notice when it literally needs to be the reflection. And I think that that's the next frontier for us, is really allowing our kids to know that when we're misbehaving and using our energy, that it's not about them. And so they can actually just literally hand us back and say, hey, you're talking to the mirror, not me. Like, I want our kids to know that stuff.
And that'll also stand them in good stead when they're dealing with other people out in the world that they come across who might project their issues onto that person.
Yes.
And if you can, and you all, I have no doubt everyone listening would have family members or friends or people through their life that they've been there for, and that person has then projected their own problems onto that person, and that can be looking at you going, you have such an amazing life because you have this and you have that, and they're saying it in a way to get a reaction from you.
Yes.
But really they're saying it because they need to hear it back for what they want for themselves, or to start clarifying their own path.
I think so too. And look, you know, in just finishing, I think one of the greatest pieces of advice that I really put in the wisdom basket was this idea of, if you feel you need extra, say, protection or armor, because you're in a world where perhaps it just sometimes feels like there's a lot of misplaced emotions and misdirected energies, then you literally can cover yourself in gold, whatever. Like I used to do a gold latex balloon. Don't know why, just felt right.
Girl likes latex and gold.
The girl likes latex and gold. Let that be into that.
Listen to me.
Into that in Hansard. We want that noted. But literally you can zip yourself up and be in that space. And there is something very powerful with that intention when you do that, because I think what it does is it reaffirms to yourself that you are already whole, and that anything coming towards you, again, is a reflection of what's going on for that other person. I mean, if you're, you know, behaving in a way that feels as authentic and loving as possible, again, not being a doormat, but just showing up with your heart, with the best intentions, you know, just being a good citizen, then anything coming towards you is usually misplaced. And so I think that us practicing that, say, gold protection or gold armor, is another radical self-responsibility, because we don't propagate the bullshit. Someone else's bullshit doesn't become our bullshit. And that is like such a wise thing to live by, isn't it?
Well, it's that whole thing of, you know, don't let other people drag you down.
Yeah.
So you've got to stand within that power. And I had no idea where this conversation was going to go. Absolutely.
Including an intermission.
Including the intermission. And there's so many other coping strategies and mechanisms that, you know, people have, that we have, you know, that allow us to stay true to ourselves, or allow us not to be harmed or guided away from our true selves by other people that wish to push back against that, or even ourselves when we're having those times where we are challenged.
Yeah.
You know, so
it's all about the human experience. I mean, the key is to not overthink this stuff. It is all about the human experience. So all of those experiences are perfect because they are part of the tapestry of life, and that is why we're here.
That sounds pretty good.
On that note, be well, beautiful Quanta folks. We'll look forward to talking with you very soon.
And enjoy your tapestry that is life.
Yes, indeed. See you.
Bye.